You already know the relationship was toxic. You've watched the videos about narcissism, you understand the manipulation, you can see the red flags now. So why are you still thinking about it? Why does a part of you still feel unsettled even though you know the relationship was not healthy? Well, understanding the relationship and feeling clear about it are two completely different processes. And most people never realize this difference. So they keep trying to solve the wrong problem. And the reason this happens has nothing to do with understanding the relationship better. Here's what usually happens. The relationship ends. At first, you're trying to make sense of what happened. So you start learning about narcissism, manipulation, covert emotional abuse. You watch videos, you read about manipulation, you start recognizing the patterns. And suddenly, things that didn't make sense before start clicking. You start seeing the love bombing, the gaslighting, the breadcrumbing, and you start realizing the dynamic was not healthy at all. And intellectually, the story finally starts to make sense. But then something really confusing happens. Even though you understand the relationship now, your mind keeps going back to certain moments, replaying conversations, trying to piece together what actually happened. Maybe it was a comment that they made that didn't quite add up. A moment where something felt off, but you told yourself that you were overreacting. A time when you brought something up that hurt you, and somehow the conversation turned into you being the problem. And afterward, you find yourself wondering things like, wait, what actually happened in that moment? Were they manipulating me, or did I misunderstand it? So your mind keeps returning to those same moments again and again, trying to organize the story in a way that finally feels clear. You might find yourself thinking things like, what did they actually mean when they said that? Did they know what they were doing? Was that manipulation, or was I just misreading it? And a part of you keeps thinking, if I just can understand this clearly enough, I'll finally be able to move on. But that moment never fully arrives. The reason this happens is actually quite simple. There are two completely different processes that happen after getting out of a toxic relationship. The first process is understanding. That is the intellectual side, the logical side. It's when you recognize the patterns, you learn the terminology, you understand what the dynamic was. Your brain can do this quickly. Sometimes in a single video, you watch something and suddenly think, oh my God, that's exactly what happened to me. Something clicks. But the second process is something very different. This is stabilization. Stabilization is when your internal sense of reality finally settles again, when your perception feels solid, when your mind no longer feels pulled back into the relationship trying to figure it all out. Insight explains the relationship, but stabilization is what allows you to finally feel clear about it. And those two processes do not happen at the same speed or in the same way. Unfortunately, most people don't realize that. They assume something very logical. They assume that if I can just understand the relationship enough, I'll finally be able to move on. So they try to get more clarity. They watch more videos. They research narcissism. They analyze the relationship again and again, trying to get the full picture. But intellectual clarity does not automatically stabilize your nervous system. And when stabilization hasn't happened yet, the brain keeps reopening the file again and again. This is what creates something that I call the stabilization gap. This is when your mind understands what happened, but your nervous system hasn't landed yet. Maybe you can explain how the relationship was unhealthy, but internally, things still feel unresolved. And when that gap exists, the brain keeps returning to the relationship, not because you're weak or anything is wrong with you, but because your system is still trying to restore a stable sense of reality. And this is normal. This is especially common after relationships that involved mixed signals, emotional inconsistency, gaslighting, love bombing, manipulation, covert emotional abuse, or confusion. Because during the relationship, your perception was constantly being destabilized. One moment, things felt great, loving, and the next moment, something fell off and didn't make any sense. So you questioned something, and the response made you question yourself. So your brain was trying to make sense of things while they were happening. But when experiences don't make sense in real time, the brain often tries to reconstruct them afterward. That's why your mind keeps going back. Not because you want the relationship back, but because your system is still trying to restore internal certainty. And this is often the point where people start judging themselves. They think, why am I still thinking about this? I should be over this by now. Why can't I just move on with my life? But what's happening here is not weakness. It's your brain trying to restore a stable sense of reality after a relationship that constantly destabilized it. And the frustrating part is, most of the advice out there focuses on understanding the relationship intellectually. Very rarely can you find information that explains how the mind and nervous system actually stabilizes afterward. And that is the piece most people are missing. So people keep trying to think their way into clarity without realizing that the system is still trying to settle. And if your mind keeps replaying the relationship like this, I'm hosting a free live masterclass where I walk through the deeper process that restores clarity and self-trust after toxic relationships so the mental loop can finally start to close. You can register at calliesorensen.com/masterclass or use the link below. So the issue isn't that you don't understand the relationship. Many people in this stage understand it very well. The issue is that understanding and stabilization are different processes. Your mind might understand the story, but your nervous system is still trying to settle. And until that stabilization happens, the mind keeps returning to the relationship. Which leads us to a really important question. If the brain is trying to stabilize something, why does it keep replaying the relationship? Why those same conversations? Why those same confusing interactions? Because the rumination itself is not random. There's actually a very specific pattern to it. In the next video, I'll show you what the rumination loop actually is and why your mind keeps replaying the relationship. Once you see how that loop works, everything starts to make a lot more sense. Click the video on your screen now to watch the next part of this series.